Have you ever faced a betrayal so public, so humiliating, that you could feel your entire world collapse in front of hundreds of watching eyes? If you've ever gone through something similar, don't just stay silent. Comment below and subscribe to our channel, because your story deserves to be heard. The auditorium was filled with cheers, balloons, and camera flashes. It was the graduation day of our only daughter, Emily. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, helping her pick the perfect dress, making sure our relatives had their invitations, and arranging the family dinner afterwards. For me, it wasn't just my daughter's milestone. It was a celebration of the years of sacrifices my husband, Richard, and I had made together as parents. Or at least, that's what I believed. As the graduates marched across the stage, I spotted Richard sitting just a few rows ahead, looking unusually restless. He kept glancing at his phone, his leg bouncing rapidly. At first, I thought he was simply nervous. After all, parents often get emotional during these ceremonies. But then, I noticed a young woman sitting quietly next to him. She wasn't a relative. She wasn't one of Emily's friends. She was someone completely unfamiliar. The moment Emily's name was called, Richard clapped mechanically, his eyes darting toward that woman instead of our daughter. A knot tightened in my stomach. Something wasn't right. When the ceremony ended, families began gathering outside to take photos. That's when Richard suddenly cleared his throat. His voice, loud and trembling, echoed across the crowd. "I have something to say." I froze. Emily froze. Everyone turned. And then, in front of our daughter, in front of our family, and in front of her classmates' parents, Richard announced, "I've decided to start a new life, without you, Margaret." He gestured toward the mysterious woman. "This is Claire. She's the person I want to be with." The crowd gasped. My daughter's face crumbled, her mascara running as tears spilled down her cheeks. Relatives whispered, cameras clicked, and my world shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I smiled. A calm, deliberate smile that unsettled everyone, including Richard. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Really, Richard, congratulations." But deep inside, my blood boiled with a rage I had never felt before. And in that moment, I decided I wouldn't just walk away quietly. I would make him regret humiliating me and our daughter. That night, Emily locked herself in her room, sobbing. I sat alone in the kitchen, replaying every detail of Richard's betrayal. The pieces began to connect: his late nights at work, his business trips, the secretive phone calls. He hadn't just fallen in love with someone else. He had been planning this for months. And then I remembered something: our joint finances. For years, I had trusted him to manage the bigger investments while I handled household expenses. If he was leaving me so suddenly, what were the chances he had already drained accounts, shifted properties, or secured assets under his name? I grabbed my laptop and began digging. Passwords weren't hard. I had lived with the man for over 2 decades. Within an hour, my suspicions were confirmed. He had transferred large sums into a private account. He was preparing to disappear with Claire, leaving Emily and me with almost nothing. But here's what Richard didn't know. I wasn't the naive, fragile woman he assumed I was. For years, I had quietly kept records, backups, and copies of every transaction. If he thought he could erase me from his life like an old photograph, he was about to learn that I had claws sharper than he could ever imagine. The following morning, I acted as though nothing had happened. Richard returned home briefly to collect some of his things, walking in with a smug grin and the audacity to kiss Emily on the forehead. She turned away in disgust. "I'll transfer some money for your expenses until you figure things out," he said casually, as though abandoning us was no bigger deal than canceling a dinner reservation. "Oh, that's thoughtful of you," I replied sweetly. "Don't worry, Richard. I'll figure things out sooner than you expect." He smirked, thinking I was broken. But inside, I was already planning my first move. Days passed, and the gossip spread like wildfire through our community. Friends who once admired our marriage now pitied me. Some whispered that I should have seen it coming. Others offered hollow sympathies. But what none of them realized was that I wasn't wallowing in sorrow. I was gathering ammunition. One night, while Richard was out flaunting his new relationship at a local restaurant, I paid a quiet visit to his office. Being married to him for 20 years had its perks. I knew every lock, every safe, and every hiding spot. Inside a locked drawer, I found a folder, and inside that folder, proof. Dozens of questionable financial dealings, fake invoices, hidden income, even evidence of tax evasion. Richard wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a criminal hiding behind a polished smile. I carefully photographed every page, my heart pounding with adrenaline. The revenge I had envisioned was no longer about just emotional payback. This was about exposing Richard for who he truly was, a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. And I knew exactly when to strike. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, Richard and Claire organized a housewarming party in the luxury apartment he had rented. He invited colleagues, friends, even family, yes, the same family who had been present at Emily's graduation when he publicly humiliated me. I showed up uninvited. Heads turned. Whispers filled the room. Richard's smug smile faltered as he saw me enter, wearing my most elegant black dress, carrying a small leather folder in my hand. "What are you doing here, Margaret?" he hissed, stepping closer. "Oh, Richard," I said sweetly, "I wouldn't miss this for the world. After all, you've built such a fascinating new life." And I brought a little gift to celebrate. The room fell silent as I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table. "Shall we go through it together? Or would you prefer I hand it directly to the authorities?" Richard's face drained of color. Claire looked confused. Guests began murmuring. Inside the folder were the documents, the proof of his fraud, the evidence of his lies. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence of the room carried my words louder than any scream ever could. "You wanted freedom, Richard? You wanted a new life?" I leaned closer, my smile never fading. "Then enjoy it, behind bars." But that was only the beginning. Because Richard had underestimated one thing: a woman's patience may wear thin, but her memory never forgets. The silence in that luxury apartment was deafening. Eyes darted from me to Richard, from Richard to the folder on the table. His fingers twitched, desperate to snatch the evidence, but he didn't dare. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Claire, still clueless, clutched his arm. "Richard, what is she talking about?" Richard forced a smile, his voice trembling with false confidence. "She's exaggerating. Margaret has always been dramatic. Don't listen to her." But I cut him off, my tone calm yet sharp. "Exaggerating? Richard, would you like me to read aloud the details of your hidden accounts? Or perhaps the list of fake companies you've been funneling money through? Should I start with the $120,000 you transferred last March? Or the property you forgot to declare?" Gasps rippled across the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers spreading like wildfire. Richard's jaw clenched, his mask slipping. He realized this wasn't just an angry wife embarrassing him. This was a carefully executed strike. "I think I'll let the authorities read it instead," I said, sliding the folder back into my bag. "Enjoy your party, Richard. You won't be enjoying freedom for much longer." And with that, I walked out, leaving behind a storm I had unleashed. The very next morning, Richard stormed into my house. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Margaret?" he snapped. I sipped my coffee, pretending to be calm though my heart pounded. "I'm simply making sure justice is served. You've humiliated me, Richard, in front of everyone I loved. But now, the humiliation is yours. You'll destroy everything," he hissed. "Do you know what prison would do to me?" I set the cup down and looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes, Richard, that's the point." But Richard wasn't going down without a fight. Over the following days, I noticed cars lingering near the house, strange calls at night, even men loitering near Emily's college. Richard was trying to intimidate me, to scare me into silence. What he didn't realize was that I was 2 steps ahead. I had already given copies of the documents to a trusted lawyer and sent backups to a safety deposit box. Even if something happened to me, Richard's secrets would still come to light. Still, I knew I had to protect Emily. She was fragile, devastated by her father's betrayal, and I couldn't let her become collateral damage. "Mom," she whispered one night, her eyes red from crying, "why didn't you yell at him? Why didn't you break down when he left?" I hugged her tightly. "Because, sweetheart, tears don't win wars. Patience does. And right now, We're not just fighting for our dignity, we're fighting for our future. She didn't fully understand, but I saw a flicker of strength ignite in her. Maybe, just maybe, she would learn that no betrayal could ever break us if we chose to rise above it. Meanwhile, Richard tried to play smart. He sent his lawyer to negotiate, claiming he'd support us financially if I agreed to stay silent. His arrogance was laughable. When the lawyer slid papers across the table, offering me a fraction of what I was rightfully owed, I leaned forward and whispered, "Tell Richard that I don't want his dirty money. I want his empire crumbling beneath him. I want him stripped of every luxury he built on lies. And I won't stop until that happens." The lawyer paled, realizing I wasn't bluffing. Weeks later, Richard and Claire hosted another gathering, this time for his business associates. Desperate to maintain his image, he invited investors, potential partners, and even local officials. And once again, I showed up. But this time, I wasn't alone. I walked in with 2 journalists, investigative reporters who had been hungry for a big story. I had fed them just enough details to spark their interest, and they arrived with cameras, recorders, and sharp questions. The moment Richard spotted us, his face turned ghostly white. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the journalists began, "we've received allegations of financial misconduct tied to Mr. Richard Bennett. We'd like to ask a few questions on record." Panic rippled through the room. Investors frowned. Officials whispered. And Claire, poor Claire, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Richard, what's going on?" she stammered. He barked at the journalists. "This is nonsense. Lies from a bitter ex-wife." But his words carried no weight. Not when the evidence was already prepared, waiting to be published. That night, I received a call. It was Richard. His voice cracked, filled with desperation. "Margaret, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this. We can work something out. I'll give you anything you want, money, property, whatever. Just stop." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. "You already gave me what I wanted, Richard," I said coldly. "The moment you stood at our daughter's graduation and announced you were leaving me, you gave me fuel. Now, I'm just burning down the life you built on betrayal." He sobbed, actually sobbed, on the phone. But my heart was stone. As weeks passed, the walls closed in on him. Investigations began. Journalists published damning articles. Investors pulled out, fearing association with scandal. His business, once thriving, crumbled. And Claire, she wasn't built for chaos. The glamour of being with a wealthy man evaporated when she saw bills piling up, lawsuits knocking at the door, and the man she thought was powerful reduced to a paranoid wreck. Within months, she was gone. Richard had lost everything. His money, his reputation, his partner. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. One rainy evening, Emily and I were sitting by the fire when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Richard standing there, drenched, hollow-eyed, his suit crumpled. "Please," he whispered, "let me in. I have nowhere else to go." For a moment, Emily's face softened. Despite everything, he was still her father. But I placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You made your choice, Richard," I said firmly. "You chose betrayal over family. And now, you can live with it." I shut the door. His desperate knocks echoed for a while, then faded into the night. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Richard was desperate, cornered, and a desperate man was dangerous. He wouldn't stop until he dragged me down with him, or destroyed what little I had left. What he didn't know was that I had prepared one final move, one that would end this game forever. The night I turned Richard away in the rain, I thought I had seen the last of him. But betrayal has a way of clinging to you, like a shadow you can't escape. Days passed quietly, almost too quietly. Emily tried focusing on her studies again, while I went back to my teaching job. Life was slowly stitching itself together. Yet, I could feel it, Richard wasn't gone. He was circling, waiting for the right moment. One evening, Emily rushed into the house, panic in her eyes. "Mom, someone's been following me after class." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Richard might stoop so low, but hearing it confirmed my fears. "It's him," I whispered. "He's desperate." I knew what I had to do. The final move, the one I'd been saving all along. I contacted Detective Harris, an officer who had been quietly watching Richard's activities ever since the journalists exposed his fraud. I handed over one last piece of evidence: recordings of Richard threatening me during his late-night calls. "This is enough," Harris said firmly. "We'll take him in. But you'll need to be ready for a confrontation. Men like Richard don't surrender easily." I nodded. I had been preparing for this moment for months. That Friday, Richard attempted his boldest move yet. He showed up at my school during parent-teacher conferences. He barged into my classroom, disheveled, eyes wild. "You ruined me, Margaret," he roared, startling parents and children alike. "Do you know what I've lost because of you?" I stood my ground, heart hammering in my chest. "You ruined yourself, Richard." I just held up the mirror. He lunged toward me, and for a split second, I thought this was the end. But then, the door burst open. Officers swarmed in, pinning him to the ground as he thrashed and screamed. The parents gasped, children cried, and Emily, who had been helping me that day, stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom, is it over?" she whispered. I pulled her into my arms. "Yes, sweetheart, it's finally over." Richard was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and harassment. The trial dragged on for months, but the outcome was inevitable. Every lie, every scheme, every betrayal he had woven was laid bare. Claire didn't even show up. She had vanished long before, leaving Richard to face his downfall alone. When the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, I felt, not joy, not triumph, but peace. At last, the ghost of betrayal had been buried. Life moved forward. Emily graduated with honors, and I stood proudly beside her, not as a woman broken by betrayal, but as a mother who had risen from its ashes. Friends often asked me how I endured it all, how I didn't collapse under the weight of humiliation and anger. My answer was always the same: revenge isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about waiting, planning, and striking when it matters most. And in Richard's case, patience had been my deadliest weapon. Now, sometimes at night, I sit by the window, sipping tea, and I wonder, does Richard ever think of us? Does he regret the choices that led him here? But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter, because in the end, he lost everything. And Emily and I? We found freedom. Speech balloon. And now, to you watching this story, tell me, have you ever seen betrayal this deep? Have you ever felt the sting of someone you trusted tearing your world apart? If yes, comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Before you go, tell us, where in the world are you watching our videos from? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join our community.